a city of gray stone and heavy clouds, there lived a man named Zaid. Zaid was a weaver of thoughts. His mind was a factory that never slept, always building what-if scenarios and why-me questions. He spent his nights staring at the ceiling, trying to solve problems that hadn't happened yet, and mourning opportunities he thought he had lost. His heart was a garden overgrown with the weeds of overthinking, and he felt as though he was carrying the weight of the entire world on his narrow shoulders. He believed that if he didn't figure everything out right now, his life would fall apart. He was so busy trying to control the wind that he forgot who created the storm. One day, Zaid visited an old teacher named Ar, who sat by a small, trickling stream in the valley. Zaid poured out his heart, talking about his fears for the future, his regrets of the past, and the suffocating noise in his head. Aref didn't interrupt. He simply handed Zaid a small, intricate piece of embroidery. From the bike, it looked like a mistangled threads of black, red, and gold, knots that made no sense, and loose ends that looked like mistakes. "This is how you see your life, Zaid," Arif said. "You are looking at the back of the tapestry, seeing only the knots and the tangles. You think the weaver has made a mistake because you cannot see the pattern." Arif then flipped the cloth over. On the front was a stunning image of a golden eagle, soaring over a mountain peak, every thread perfectly placed to create a masterpiece. "Stop overthinking the knots," Arif whispered. "Allah is the Al-Khalek, the creator, and Al-Mudabbir, the planner. While you are awake at night worrying about a door that is closed, He is already building a hallway you haven't even seen yet. You are trying to calculate the math of your life with a human mind, but Allah is working with the mathematics of the infinite. He is already making a way for you, but you are too busy staring at the wall to notice the door opening behind you." Zaid looked at the stream and noticed a small leaf caught in a swirl of water. It struggled for a moment, trapped against a rock. Zaid reached down to save it, but Arif stopped him. "Wait," he said. As they watched, the water rose just a fraction, and the current naturally pushed the leaf into a faster, smoother part of the stream, carrying it exactly where it needed to go. Arif smiled. The leaf didn't have to plan the path. The water already knew the way. Your overthinking is like the leaf trying to swim against the current. You are exhausting yourself fighting a flow that is designed to carry you to your destination. Trust that the one who feeds the bird in the desert and the fish in the deep ocean has not forgotten the heartbeat of Zaid. Zaid went home, and for the first time in years, he didn't try to solve the future. He realized that overthinking is the arrogant belief that our worry is more powerful than Allah's decree. He started to replace "what if this goes wrong" with "Allah is with me." He understood that when a door closes, it isn't a punishment. It's a redirection. When a path is blocked, it isn't a delay. It's a protection. He stopped trying to be the architect of his own life and started being the humble guest of the Almighty. The noise in his head died down, and in that silence, he finally heard the whisper of peace. He realized that the way was already made. He just had to have the patience to walk it. Zaid walked back into the city of gray stone, but the stones didn't seem as heavy anymore, and the clouds didn't seem as dark, because he realized that the weather of his life was not his to control, but his to experience. He returned to his small workshop, where a pile of unpaid debts and unfinished projects sat like a mountain of shadows on his desk, and for a moment the old factory of his mind began to whir to life, again spinning a web of "how will I pay" and "what if I lose everything?" But Zaid closed his eyes and remembered the golden eagle on the tapestry, and he whispered to the silence that the bird doesn't store grain for the winter because it knows the provider of the winter is also the provider of the spring. He decided to do the small task in front of him instead of trying to solve the problem of next year. He picked up a single thread and began to weave knot with the frantic energy of a man trying to save himself, but with the calm grace of a man who knows he is already saved. As he worked, a traveler knocked on his door. A man who had been wandering the markets for days, looking for a weaver, who understood the old patterns of the mountains. Didn't want a cheap cloth, he wanted a masterpiece, and he was willing to pay a price that would clear all of Zaid's debts in a single day. Zaid stood frozen, realizing that while he had been awake at night crying over his empty pockets, the traveler had already been on a horse riding toward his door from a land 3 days away. The way had been moving toward him. While he was busy thinking the way was closed, he saw that his overthinking was like a man trying to light a candle. While standing in the middle of a sunrise, it was unnecessary and it only blinded him to the light that was already there. He understood that Allah's timing is like a seed in the ground. You cannot see it growing, you cannot hear it moving, but it is breaking through the earth at the exact microsecond. It is ready. Zayd realized that the reason for his delay was to teach him that his provision was never in his hands, it was always in the hands of the one who commands the kun, faya, kun, the bee. And it is. He stopped being a prisoner of his own logic and became a student of divine mystery, seeing that every lost opportunity was just a space being cleared for a better one. He looked at the knots in the back of his life and finally smiled, because he knew that on the other side, the masterpiece was already finished, and that the weaver of the heavens never drops a stitch or loses a thread. Everything is happening for a reason, and the reason is to bring you to the point where you stop looking at the problem and start looking at the provider. Zayd began to walk through the streets of the Grey City, not as a man searching for a destination, but as a man who had already arrived at peace, and he saw a woman named Mara sitting by a dry fountain, her face buried in her hands, as she wept for a future that felt like a falling house. Mara had lost her business, and she was overthinking every mistake she had made and every bill she could not pay. Her mind was a whirlwind of if only. And what now? That left her paralyzed in the cold. Zayd sat beside her and did not offer her a map, but offered her a story. He told her about the traveler who had been riding toward his door while he was still crying in the dark. He told her that the architect of the heavens doesn't wait for us to stop worrying before he starts working. He works while we sleep and he plans while we weep. Zayd picked up a small stone from the dry fountain and told her that even this stone has a purpose and a place in the grand design, and if Allah has not forgotten the position of a single pebble, how could he forget? The daughter of a king, Mara, looked at the dry fountain, and Zayd told her that the water isn't gone. It is just being redirected to a deeper well, because sometimes Allah dries up the surface so that we are forced to dig for the treasure that lies beneath. She realized that her overthinking was like a person trying to hold back the ocean with a paper shield. It was an exhausting illusion of control that only kept her from swimming with the tide. Zayd told her that the reason for her struggle was to strip away the false gods of her own ego and her own planning until she was left with nothing but the truth that Allah is enough. As they spoke, the first drops of rain began to fall and the dry fountain began to sing once more, and Mara felt the heavy cloak of worry slip from her shoulders. She understood that the way was not something she had to build, it was something she had to trust. The city of Greystone began to glow in the rain, as if the light was coming from inside the rocks themselves, and Zayd realized that the ultimate motivational lesson is that your life is not a puzzle for you to solve, it is a journey for you to witness, because while you are busy overthinking the problem, Allah has already finished the masterpiece. Zayd and Mara watched as the Grey City began to transform, not because the walls had changed, but because the hearts of the people were finally beginning to breathe. And Zayd realized that the greatest difficult good was the quiet work of tawakkul, the act of placing your palm in the hand of the unseen and walking forward without a map. He saw a man named Omar, who was a merchant in the Great Bazaar, pacing back and forth because a shipment of silk had been lost at sea, and Omar was calculating his ruin over and over in his mind, his eyes bloodshot from a lack of sleep. Sa'id approached him and didn't talk about money. He talked about the mountain of glass and the sea of driftwood, showing him that the lost silk was not a loss of wealth, but a gain of wisdom. He told Omar that while he was mourning the silk in the ocean, Allah was already growing a forest of sandalwood in a land Omar hadn't even visited yet, and that the ruin was actually a clearance of his old life to make room for a kingdom he was finally ready to lead. Omar stopped pacing, and for the first time in his life, he let out a breath that reached his soul, realizing that the math of the mind is always a zero, but the math of the divine is always infinity. The city of stone became a city of light. As one by one, the people stopped trying to be the architects of their own fate and started being the witnesses of Allah's perfection. Zayd saw that his own journey from the knots of the tapestry to the peace of the fountain was a bridge he had built for the entire world, proving that the reason your time is coming. Keep believing, keep fighting. Don't just watch. Go out and prove them wrong. Thank you for being part of the journey. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.